The most dangerous moments in human history did not always happen in public. There were no speeches, no cameras, no crowds watching. Sometimes, the fate of the entire world rested in places so isolated, so hidden, that history almost forgot them completely. One of those moments happened deep beneath the ocean, no sunlight, no witnesses, no way out, just steel walls, rising heat, and a single decision that could have erased humanity. This is the true story of the submarine captain who nearly started nuclear war, in 1962. The world lived under a constant shadow. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, stood face to face, armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy civilization many times over. The Cold War was not a war of soldiers on battlefields. It was a war of fear, suspicion, and seconds, both sides believed the other was preparing to strike first, and they were both ready to respond. The center of this tension was a small island just 90 miles from the coast of Florida, Cuba. After the Cuban Revolution, the Soviet Union quietly began placing nuclear missiles on the island, missiles capable of reaching major American cities in minutes. When U.S. intelligence discovered this, the reaction was immediate. The United States declared a naval blockade around Cuba. Warships surrounded the island. Aircraft patrolled the skies. The world stood closer to nuclear war than it ever had before, and somewhere far from the headlines, a submarine slipped beneath the waves. The submarine was part of a Soviet fleet sent toward the Caribbean. Unlike massive aircraft carriers or missile silos, submarines were silent, invisible, and unpredictable. This one carried a secret weapon, a nuclear torpedo, not a conventional weapon, not a warning shot, a nuclear device capable of obliterating an entire city. Inside the submarine, dozens of men lived packed together in a narrow steel tube. There were no windows, no fresh air, no escape. And as the submarine traveled deeper into the Atlantic, something went wrong. Communication was the submarine's lifeline. Radio contact was how crews knew whether the world above them still existed. But underwater, communication was fragile. At some point during the mission, the submarine lost contact with Soviet command. No messages, no updates, no confirmation of peace or war. The crew had no idea what was happening on the surface. For all they knew, nuclear war had already begun. Then it happened. Explosions echoed through the water, not close enough to destroy the submarine, but close enough to be terrifying. The U.S. Navy had detected the submarine. American warships began dropping depth charges. These were not intended to destroy the submarine. They were meant as signals. A way of saying, "We know you're there." Surface. But the submarine crew did not know this. To them, it sounded like an attack. Metal creaked. The hull vibrated. Lights flickered. Inside the submarine, panic spread. In war, assumptions kill faster than weapons. The crew began to reason through the situation. They were under attack. They had lost communication. They were deep underwater. What did that mean? To many on board, the conclusion was obvious. Nuclear war must have already started. If the United States was attacking them now, it meant diplomacy had failed. And if diplomacy had failed, the next step was total annihilation. Inside, the submarine was a torpedo unlike any other. This was not a standard explosive. It was a nuclear torpedo detonating. It would not just destroy nearby ships. It would send a nuclear shock wave through the ocean. Radiation would spread. Cities would burn. Retaliation would be inevitable. Launching, it would almost certainly trigger a full-scale nuclear exchange between the superpowers. The end of civilization would follow, and the decision to launch did not rest on one person alone. Soviet military protocol was clear. To launch the nuclear torpedo, 3 senior officers had to agree, not 1, not 2. All 3. This rule existed to prevent rash decisions. But under extreme pressure, rules can become fragile. 1 officer voted yes. Another officer voted yes. 2 approvals. Only 1 remained. The 3rd officer was different. He was experienced, calm under pressure, and deeply aware of the consequences. While others were convinced the war had already begun, he hesitated. He asked a simple but dangerous question. Where is the confirmation? There was none. No official order, no message from command, no undeniable proof that nuclear war had started. Just fear. The submarine was running Out of air, the temperature inside rose to unbearable levels. Carbon dioxide levels climbed. Men were sweating, exhausted, terrified. Depth charges continued outside. Every second increased the pressure. Other officers argued that waiting was dangerous if war had begun. Failing to act would be betrayal if they hesitated. The Soviet Union could be destroyed while they did nothing. The weight of history pressed down on one man. Against protocol, against fear, against overwhelming pressure. The third officer refused. He would not authorize the launch, not without confirmation. The nuclear torpedo remained unfired for hours. The submarine remained submerged. Then, finally, it surfaced. When the submarine emerged, the truth became clear. There had been no nuclear war. The depth charges were signals, not attacks. The world was still standing. If the torpedo had been launched, the United States would have retaliated. The Soviet Union would have responded. Cities across the globe would have been destroyed. Human civilization might not have survived. There were no celebrations. No medals. No public acknowledgement. The incident was classified. The world never knew how close it came to extinction. History moved on, but that moment, deep beneath the ocean, had quietly changed everything. This story is not about weapons.It is about human judgment. Technology failed. Communication failed. Systems failed. Only one thing prevented catastrophe: a human being who refused to panic. The most dangerous moments in history are not always loud. Sometimes they are silent, hidden, decided in darkness, and the world never knows how close it came to ending. If you were trapped underwater, cut off from the world, convinced war had already begun, would you have made the same decision? Because in that moment, the future of humanity depended on just one answer. Subscribe for more content like